Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Astrology Unplugged. I'm Rick DiClemente, and we're trying to keep everybody on the screen here. We'll see what happens. We're going to continue with what we were doing last week, which is transits to sensitive points in the chart. A lot of people are here and they don't want their camera turned on, which is fine. You can do what you wish. Welcome to those of you viewing this on YouTube. Tonight is very critical because if you want to learn about a person's chart, it's a leap. It's a leap to go from a person's chart to a person's chart that's alive. I gotta mute something here. I gotta mute something. Mute. Oh, there we go. Okay. There's a difference. There's Marcia's chart. There's a difference between a chart and a chart that's alive. And once we study the chart, and of course, we're born 2 days apart, she and I, but you see this stellium of planets in Libra, and Marcia's got a Capricorn sun opposite Uranus. What I look for is what is really significant. And you notice nothing is angular here. Nothing is near this angle. That's too far away. Nothing's near this one. Nothing's near this one. Nothing's near that one. It's nothing. It's no big deal. It just means no particular planet sticks out. And it actually leans more towards balance when you have a chart like this. She does have the Mercury and Sag rising, and I've known her a long time. She's very Sagittarian-like, very optimistic and ebullient. Jupiter's rising. And also, you have a very strong bucket pattern to Jupiter in not only Aries, but it's next to Eris. So I would say by intuition already, tonight's reading is going to be about your Jupiter being near Eris. Marcia, if you wouldn't mind, tilt your camera down a little bit, please. I can just see the top of your head. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so I don't pick these charts because I think they're neat. I pick them because that's what happens. Now, I will put you on unmute here. And I will be going through times in your chart that planets were hit by other planets, and you'll be able to see. Now, let's just start out and take our time. You having the Grand Cross, it's like looking at my own chart, except I have a different birth time, of course. You have the sun opposite Uranus, but it's off by 5 degrees. This is very, very powerful. This is the reason that you're interested in astrology, because it's lined up with Chiron opposite Uranus. And most people I've seen that are really interested in astrology, really want to get into it and study it, are people with Uranus opposite Chiron. Okay? And I told you everybody born from 1952 to 1989 had that. So when those planets become involved, your Chiron opposite Uranus is not particularly strong because it's not near the angles, but it is strong because it's along the side of the sun. Okay, you have the 3 planets in Libra. You have the Venus in Scorpio, Pluto in Leo for that whole generation. Your North Node is in 2 degrees of Pisces. So what I'm going to go back, I'm going to focus on your Saturn because you are a Capricorn, but I'm going to really focus heavily on Jupiter next to Eris. Because remember, I've only had Eris on the charts for less than a year. Because Eris is brand new, and what we're encountering in the world is because of Eris and Pluto squaring each other. That's what's going on now, why it's so heavy and so bizarre. And we are facing a Pluto return in the USA's chart. But what's so peculiar is when Eris was discovered in approximately 2005, when she was discovered, she was at a right angle to Pluto. Is that right? Let me see. She was at a right angle to Uranus. That's right, at a right angle to Uranus. All right. Now, when Jupiter is at the head of a chart, let's disregard the North Node. You can see the bucket pattern here. Here's the bucket or a fan, like a Chinese fan. And here's Jupiter by itself. Now, Jupiter, I found out through progressing, Jupiter moved 11 degrees in the next 67 days. In 1952, in January and February, Jupiter moved 67 degrees. That can't be right. I'm off on something. I'm going to have to go examine this. No, it didn't move 67. It moved from 6. It moved 10 degrees, 10 or 11. It moved from 6 to 17. It moved from 6 to 17. So your progressed chart, since we're both 67, the progressed chart Jupiter has moved to 17, 18 degrees. So our progressed Jupiter is sitting around here, which is under fire by Saturn, etc. right now. So when I put Eris on here, remember Eris is spending 120 years in the sign of Aries. I want to investigate what happened to your chart when Jupiter got hit. So the thing that's so good about a bucket pattern to Jupiter, there are good and bad things. What's good about it is you've already got too much Capricorn. You've got a strong Saturn on your Mars. Your Saturn is affecting Neptune. You've already got a Sun and Chiron in Capricorn. That's too much. Well, the Jupiter allays that. The Jupiter changes it because Jupiter is much more optimistic where Saturn tends towards the pessimistic. Jupiter is also your education and your growth and your travel. So let's go back in time and see when certain planets have hit this Jupiter. Now, in your lifetime, you can see the Uranus goes around every 84 years. So it wasn't too long ago, the Uranus just crossed this Jupiter. So let's go back in time. It's probably near your retirement time. I know you worked on Broadway and you're in New York City. Okay, let's take a look at this. All right. All right, let's go back to approximately, 2010. Okay, here's Uranus at 29. Let's move by years. So we see that around 2012, Uranus went over the main planet, one of the main planets. It's not, well, it is the chart ruler. The planet that rules the ascendant is Jupiter, and it's also much like a chart ruler because it's a bucket handle. So what happened here? You got to realize now. Let's follow suit here. You are a Capricorn, and remember, while Uranus was on Jupiter, Pluto was on your Sun. Pluto was on your Chiron. So you tend towards contraction, be careful, be conservative. But when Uranus goes over Jupiter, it's the exact opposite. What am I being so uptight for? What am I being so careful for? I'm going to let loose. So what happened to you in 2012?
That's 7 years ago, right?
Yeah.
It was the year I turned 60.
Mm-hmm. Make sure the recording is still going, which it is. So about 2012, what you're looking for is a breaking free personally, of letting go and letting yourself out.
I was having a lot of fun working on a show.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the show, and I was working with a lot of kids, so it was a lot of fun. And even though it was a lot of work, because we work 6 days a week, 6 nights a week, plus matinees on 3 days a week. And Molly was, 7 years ago. She was in high school.
Okay, so what we're looking for is a real rapid, sudden explosion. That's what Uranus hits Jupiter. That's what happens. A sudden release. Now, you can let that go for now. Don't strain to find it because
Right.
we're going to look at so many planets. And when you come back to it, you'll be able to, your subconscious will just say, this is it. Okay, let's go back in time. Let's go back in time and see what Uranus did when it crossed your ascendant. Okay? Remember, Uranus is 21 years per quadrant. So if we go back in time to Uranus crossing the ascendant, which it does to everybody once in their 84-year history, here comes Uranus back on the ascendant. See it there? This is from the 12th house into the first house. So we're looking at 1982, 1983. Okay, what happened to you around then? It would be very liberating. It could have also involved going forth and traveling.
Yes. Yes, I did. Yes. I toured with a theater company.
Uh-huh.
Did a lot of touring around the United States and in England, Scotland, and Wales.
And it always happens suddenly. And it always changes you permanently.
Yeah.
It's very liberating. So what was it about that trip that was liberating for you? Not just at the time, but it was a liberation for you.
Right. Well, it was very eye-opening to work theater in other countries and other locations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that we see here is you don't need a lot of encouragement to let go because you've got Sag rising, you've got Jupiter at the bucket pattern, and you've got the Sun and Chiron opposite Uranus. So you're not like a typical Capricorn. You're not a typical careful, plodding Capricorn. Okay, let's look at some other planets. All right. We see in your lifetime, Pluto started here. Let's see what happened when Pluto went over these three. Okay? When it went over these three. This is around the time that I knew you in Kentucky. Okay, here's Pluto about 78. 1978, 79, 80. 77 through 77, the late 3 years of the 70s. Mm-hmm. Pluto went all over those three planets. Mm-hmm. What happened to you at that time?
Well, that's when I entered really professional work in the theater. I left West Virginia and I started working professionally. And I worked summer stock, and then I worked at theaters in Miami, and then I moved to New York. So it was all in that 3-year period.
That's a massive transition. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's find out where to play. I remember the day you told me you were going to go to China and adopt, mm-hmm. Which was mind-blowing. Mm-hmm. What you see, that doesn't come by because of Mars or Venus or the sun. Something major hit you, not beside the biological clock. What year was that you decided you were going to go adopt?
Well, that was a process. So let's see. It was somewhere in 1994. No, okay. Wait. No, maybe even a little earlier. 93.
All right, that's good enough.
Somewhere in there.
The outer planets move very slowly. Okay, this is September of that year. Okay?
Of 93?
Yeah. See up here? That's what the outer wheel is. The inner wheel doesn't move. This is a birth chart. Yeah. The outer wheel is that date, and I move them forward and backward with these tools here. So we're looking at, let's go back to July just to get the middle of the year. Okay, here's the middle of 93. You always start by looking at the big planets, the outer three. What was Pluto doing? Pluto was at 23 or so. It was getting near your Venus. What house rules your children? This is the 5th house. The 5th house is ruled by Aries, which means Mars. So your Mars in Libra, this is the planet that rules your having children. So we don't think it's Pluto hitting Venus, but we're going to keep looking. All right. Saturn was going to cross your nose. I don't think that was enough. Neptune was at 19 or 20 degrees of Capricorn. So Neptune was squaring your Mars. There's your ruler of the fifth house. Your Mars was 1950. Pluto was at 1955 in the summer of 1993. So that's exactly what caused it. And when Neptune hits Mars, and Mars is the ruler of the fifth house, it doesn't mean specifically you're going to have children. But what it really means is this, and most people don't get this. The Neptune squaring Mars, all right? First of all, you're born with Mars. And you're born with Mars next to Neptune. Mine's exact. My Mars and Neptune are exact. Yours are different. Yours are a degree and a half away. Okay? What caused you to go have a child was not physical. It was not a bio clock. It was a spiritual endeavor. Mm-hmm. When Neptune hits your Mars, well, let's figure it out. Mars ruling a person's chart makes them very Aryan. And you were kind of Aryan when you played puck. You know, kind of out there, kind of fresh and refreshing spirit and childlike. When Neptune is involved with Mars, Neptune takes command. Neptune takes command of anything it's near because it's the spiritual godlike planet. Okay? So what happens is your Mars can become unsatisfied. You can become dissatisfied. I'm going out and I'm getting things. I'm going out and I'm doing things. I'm going out and I'm doing things. But what's this adding up to? When Neptune gets involved with Mars, it wants the Mars to become more like a Mars in Pisces. It wants you to become more Piscean, more spiritual adventure. So I think, not only do I think it was karmic and that you and Molly knew each other before, there's no doubt about that, but you were very aware of what was going on, and you were now traveling on a broader spiritual realm because you went forward with that impulse. Most people that would get that impulse would not go get a child. Okay? A lot of them would try escaping. They would get into alcohol. They would get into drugs. A lot of them would have affairs. Most of the time when Neptune hits people in America, they become very dissatisfied, and it's a negative experience. But you didn't use it for negative because you were very sensitive to Neptune. And Neptune wants you to go for more refinement. Refine your life. Get away from the loudness. Get into the subtlety of life. And there's nothing that can do that more than having a child. Mm-hmm. So what, in your words, came over you at that time?
Well, it was a very spiritual experience. And of course, part of me was frightened to go forward with this by myself.
Of course.
I felt very drawn to doing this, and I just took risks and I just went for it.
Okay, now, that's wonderful. And go ahead.
But I did have a couple very spiritual experiences along the way in that process.
Of course you did. Neptune is out of this world. And you had your best friend go with you, which was a really nice thing to do. Mm-hmm. Now let's go back, and I've never even tried this. Let's go look at your 12th harmonic, because I'm sure that you reuniting with Molly as a baby was a spiritual reunion.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so let's go. I don't even have to look at her chart. Let's take your chart. Let's go do the harmonics on your chart. Okay, so now we see let's go take a look. I've never looked at this before. Let's go take a look at your 12th harmonic. There's the 12th harmonic. Everything is multiplied by 12 and put back on the circle. Now we see in your 12th harmonic, your Venus is very strong here. Okay, Venus in Aquarius, which is...
I lost your chart because the phone rang.
I'll get it back.
Oh, thanks.
Huh. No, let me see what's going on here. Still recording. Let's share. You got it now?
No.
No?
No. Should I? Oh, there. I have it now.
Okay.
I've got it.
Venus is at the top of the chart. It's at a bucket pattern, and Venus in Aquarius is about reaching out, doing something very humanitarian. So remember, this is your history throughout your past lives. So you've always been very humanitarian. 4 strong planets in Gemini show that you've been very much into communication, a jack of all trades. You could do many different things. Now, it's very intriguing here because you got a very powerful T-square to Saturn and Virgo. The 12th harmonic explains why you're here. Okay? You've got Eris opposite Neptune, T-square to Saturn and Virgo. What this means, I'm going to explain this first before we go into your daughter's reunification. What this means is in your past life, when you have a very strong Saturn and Virgo like this, it means that in your past lives, you believed that you had to do things just so. The 12th harmonic is what you were doing through many lifetimes. What you were doing there's only one purpose with lifetimes is to go back to God. Okay? So in your lifetime, you were very much programmed to do things X, Y, Z, by the book. Okay? Very critical. You're probably in an environment where they were very critical of you. You're probably very critical of yourself, and that explains why you took a lifetime in 1952 or 51, where you're the opposite. You got Jupiter rising, you got Sag rising, you got Jupiter at the bucket handle of the chart. What's happening in your chart is you're learning before you took this lifetime that I don't have to be my own drill sergeant to get myself there. And I think the adoption, we're going to go look. I haven't even looked yet. I think the adoption was a turning point. It was a turning point where do you see what happened? Neptune was hitting your Mars. What happened was you came into many lifetimes of being tough on yourself and people all around you with their dogma saying you have to be X, Y, Z. You take this lifetime where you're the opposite. You want to be free and liberated. Okay, so thus all the Jupiter. But there has to come a time when one switches to the other. And my hunch is during the time when she came on board. Now, again, that was the summer of what?
Well, when I actually adopted her was February of 1997.
Yeah, but what were we just looking at? You had the idea?
Oh, we were looking at like 93.
July of 93, okay.
Yeah. Right. And it went through several years at that time, but.
Of course. Yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at the chart. We're going to stop this here. We're going to get your 12th harmonic, and we're going to put the outer wheel on it, and we're going to spin forward to July of 1993. Okay, so now we're seeing how the event in 93, let me repaint your screen, how the event and the urge that you were having in 93, how it lined up with this whole history of past lives. So we see that the Venus is really important in this chart we see that Neptune and Uranus have both recently opposed your sun at 15 degrees. Well, that's transiting. Pluto was at 22. Neptune, Uranus, Saturn at 22. So it looks to me like the outer planets were hitting your sun at that time. And what will you say were your top 2 or 3 reasons for you to adopt at that time, looking back at it?
The top 3 reasons?
Yeah, 2 or 3.
Yeah, well, the urge to be a mother.
Right.
Probably the strongest. I didn't want to go through childbirth.
I don't blame you.
I didn't want to. And I felt that a child spiritually needed me.
That's wonderful. That's fabulous. And we could actually do our chart some night and put the 2 of you together.
Mm.
So what we're seeing, if you were my client and I were spending an hour with you, that's exactly what I would say. What I'm learning, and I'm endeavoring to put this in my new book. This is the theme of the new book. We've all had histories where we've had dogma, where we were so conscious of obeying. You got to do the right thing. You have to do it this way. And we come through many lifetimes where we're all focused on behavior. You have to behave this way. And the message is, if you don't, you're not going to get in the pearly gates. And moreover, you're going to hell and burn forever, which is just ridiculous, I think. I mean, 650 million years should be long enough. It shouldn't just be forever. There's much left to burn after all that time. But what we're learning now, and it's shaking up the world, and a lot of reason we're learning it is because of Eris. We're learning that it's BS. We're learning that the church used a lot of that fear to control people and to get money and empires. Okay, but even beside that, we're learning that we're born innocent. We're born innocent. So I would say, because of looking at all these charts, I know you've been in the theater business, but I would say to you, without knowing anything about you and your daughter, I would say one of the main things you've taught her all your life, and look at that cross behind me. See that? I don't know how that happened. It just happened. Is to not be self-critical.
Is to what?
Is to not be self-critical.
Oh.
If I were to take you out and put you in a child care place or a rehab place, this would not only be, your Jupiter would be your power, which is, hey, confidence and pep talk and cheerleader. But I would say to you, one of your main messages that you would give children around you is to not be so tough on themselves, to be accepting of who they are. One look at Molly and you can just see that the girl just shines. She's just, the being that is in there is just shining forward. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now, we'll do this some night as the main subject. We've even done some of it already, where we talk about life purpose. But we can see that time period was the switch. I think at that time period, that's why it took several years, you went from the false belief, which was wearing out in you, was getting weaker and weaker and getting rarefied, of you had to do things a certain way, into more freedom. And that's pretty liberating, to go across the planet, pick up a child, and come all the way back home. That's pretty mind-blowing. And
there was also a major involvement of a relationship that ended because of it.
Okay, now,
Yeah.
How long was the relationship going on?
8.5 years.
Okay. Did the relationship get to a point where it was obvious that it was codependent?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the number one thing in my book. The number one is when you drop the codependency, everything comes to you.
Right.
I mean, right away.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because when you're codependent, you're not quite ready to live. You're kind of living on borrowed time.
Yeah.
Borrowed energy. When you drop it, that means you're ready to.
I felt stuck for many years.
Many people use it.
Horribly, terrible feeling.
Okay, well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, since it's just me and you here, it's very intimate. We're going to just keep looking at your chart. I don't have anybody else here. Let's take a look at Marcia. All right. Let's take a look at what we think is critical. Okay, one moment, please. All right. Okay, now, the Uranus is really volatile because no matter what you're doing, the sun wants to be itself. The sun can't be itself when Uranus is there. The sun wants to be Capricornian, but it's not allowed to because Uranus is there. And that's why you and I are both a very strong mixture of Capricorn and Aquarius. So we know that whenever Uranus hit this sun, it would have been massive. Let's look at other planets here. Let's look at Saturn. Let's see what happened when Saturn hit the top of your chart. Okay, Saturn would be in Virgo, and you have a Virgo midheaven, which means you are known as a technician at work. Not only do people depend on you at work, they can double and triple depend on you at work because you're the Capricorn, you're making sure it gets done. You got the Chiron in Capricorn, you're making sure it gets done. And you got the Virgo midheaven, you're making sure it's done the right way. And you're doing it in a non-obnoxious way. You're not being a battle axe about it. You're doing it with humor and, a smile on your face. So let's go back and look at you around the age of 26 when Saturn crossed that midheaven, okay? Just to show you how these things work. Okay, let me repaint the screen. Welcome back, Elke. And we're going to go way back in time. Okay, that was the second event. We'll do both of them. We'll do Saturn going over your midheaven twice. So this is right before your Saturn return. It looks tilted, but this is the top of your chart. Okay, so we're looking at 1979 into 1980. You would see Saturn coming over the top of your chart. You would see employment becoming more serious, moving more towards administrative work, more about your technicality. What happened then? You would have been 27.
27?
Around then.
Okay. Well, that's when I really, really, really worked in professional theater, and I was a stage manager.
Right.
And it was very responsible position. And
so you're directing traffic for everybody, right?
Yeah, I was.
And you're right on the detail. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now you got to really look at this and start to study this. Watch the blend from that time until the Saturn returned. Because at this time, Saturn was in a different sign, Virgo. The Saturn return had not started yet until it hit 0 degrees of Libra. So what I'm talking about is this kind of new pressure at work led towards you growing up more. That's what a Saturn return does at the end of chapter 1 in your life. So let's go forward. Now we're going to go into your actual Saturn return. And there we see it in around the fall of 81. And that's when your personal Saturn return happened. And that's when you became even more serious about your direction and more planted in your direction.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened in 81?
I also started studying body work then.
Okay, very good. And the body work, I would think, also has to do with Saturn squaring that Chiron.
Mm-hmm. Chiron
is very much involved with, it's the main planet when you're talking about people becoming masseuses and that kind of work. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go around for the heck of it. So what I'm trying to show you is that time in 81 was triggered by what happened in the other time I just talked to you about, when you were 27. One led into the other. Okay, now let's go 30 years later. At your second Saturn return, now let's go by years. Okay, here we go. Here's your second Saturn return around 2011. So that's the end of chapter 2, the beginning of chapter 3. So what happened around 8 years ago?
Oh, 2011 you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
8 years ago.
Around then.
Molly started having some difficulties, emotional difficulties, and she woke me up to that fact. And so we started to work with that. I was single still. I was working hard.
Now, what happens during the second return is usually you start to feel like I've paid my dues. I can relax now. I don't have to keep an eye on managing everything. I can back off and become a little more living my life for myself.
Oh, yeah, that I could do. Yeah, because she was a bit older, sure.
So at the same time that she's having difficulties, you're becoming free.
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
She's
all right,
a little
so that's the second Saturn return.
Yeah.
All right. Back to the books. Do you want to ask about if you would like to ask about a particular time and why it was thus, then we can do that. Doesn't have to be the other way around.
2005.
Now, 2005 was when when Eris was discovered. Okay? Now, not only was Eris discovered, it was discovered next to your natal Jupiter. So your natal Jupiter would have been on fire. What month are we looking at?
April.
April 2005. April 2005. Okay, here's the outer planets. We see Pluto is relatively quiet. Eris has just been discovered, even though she's at 20 degrees of Aries, and she's opposite your Mars-Neptune. The natal Eris is discovered right by Jupiter. So I would have to say that that's what happened. This is right around the time that Pluto got demoted. Eris is discovered opposite this Mars-Neptune on the cusp of the 11th. Okay, what I think happened there with the cusp of the 11th house, it's friends and activities and organizations. Mm-hmm. So what kind of thing happened then?
Well, my mother died.
Okay, there's a shock.
In April.
Your mom died then. All right.
2005.
Usually the moon is involved. Egg. When the mom passes, Saturn is at 20. So your Mars Neptune got a double whammy then. Not only was Eris hitting your Mars Neptune, the chart ruler Mars, Saturn was square to it. You got hit by Eris and Saturn at the same time on your Mars. Okay, now let's talk about that. Mars ruler of the chart. Okay, I'm going out on limbs, but I'm doing so after lots of research. What I've been finding with people, and you got to speak this very softly. It really seems that people leave us when they know we're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even if you're not getting along with them at the time.
Right.
At the soul level, they're still watching you. But I've seen so much of this now. And in fact, I have seen so many people leave another person when they know they're going to be okay, where if the person had stayed, they wouldn't have been okay. Because there's too much leaning on the other person, too much depending on that person. So it would seem to me that your mother left. Remember, she's got, what, 4 kids? Three kids?
4.
Three.
4.
Who's the 4th one?
Jimmy.
Oh, Jimmy. Yeah, I haven't seen him so long. Yeah. Okay. Well, does that make any sense to you that she left when she had a feeling that you guys are all going to be okay?
Well, yeah, and she actually waited till everyone showed up before she passed. And Jimmy was the last one to get there, and she waited.
Isn't that fascinating?
And the next evening, Jimmy and Ann both had the same dream. And her face was in a picture frame.
Wow.
And she came to both of them and told them both that she was fine.
Wow.
And the 2 of them are her younger children. And Duff and I are the older children. And that she did not come to us that way. And we had also seen death before, and they never had.
Well, it's an interesting research to do.
Mm-hmm.
You got to touch it lightly because some people get upset when you bring up those kind of subjects.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, since we're at 10 minutes till 9, let's take a look at what's coming up for you. It's still recording. All right. Now, I don't know how to say this. I'm going to just say this to everybody. Okay, everybody. Saturn is right here. Saturn is at 14 degrees. Pluto is at 20. 14 and 20. For the whole world, next year, Saturn and Pluto are going to conjoin. Let's show you this. Let's just show you this. As Elke takes a deep breath, and I don't blame you.
We all take a deep breath.
Well, it's heavy right now. It sure is.
Yeah,
And I've been working with some alternate theories too. Okay, there you see Saturn has passed Pluto. Saturn is going to be January.
220?
Yeah, here it is. See Saturn passing Pluto? There's Saturn. January 11th. Saturn and Pluto at 22 degrees. While Eris is over at 23. Saturn and Pluto at 22 plus, while Eris is at 23. Stationary. I saw this in Trump's chart, and I just don't see how, I honestly don't see how he's going to keep whatever mentality he has together. I don't see how he can possibly do it. That's my opinion. Saturn and Pluto are going to come together. And if you've read Tarnis's book cosmos and psyche, he puts a tremendous amount of focus on Saturn and Pluto combinations, oppositions, squares, conjunctions, Holocaust, 9/11. Heavy, heavy events happened during those times. They're also the beginning of times when, what are you hearing now? What are you hearing from everybody? We got to rebuild new structures, new organizations. All the foundations that we counted upon are falling apart. So that's going to be the real theme of all next year. It's almost unbelievable that Pluto and Eris are square, let alone Saturn piggybacking on it at the same time. And I've been thinking a lot about it. I think I think one of the things that's happening, there's never been anything like this in astrology. And that can only mean that we've never been ready for something like this. Why else is it there? Saturn and Pluto means, if you've ever read Don Juan's books with Castaneda,
Right.
you have to be impeccable. Because the number one thing he told Castaneda was you have to be impeccable, which means you have to be 100% in ownership of your energy and what you do. Now, what's happening to us now, we're faltering because we're doing the exact opposite of what I've been screaming for 15 years now. The number one thing in the USA chart that we should be doing is developing new relationships with other countries. Developing new friendships with other countries, not going overseas and insulting everybody. So we're hastening our failure. We're hastening our failure because we somehow got this false Saturn-Venus in Cancer belief, which is in Trump's chart, that if we become more provincial and close ourselves off at the border, that's going to keep the trouble out there. It's not. That's all I'll say about it. It's going to get much worse because, as I've been saying all along, they're going to stop playing with us. They're going to start having games and not inviting us. And then we're going to learn. But anyhow, if we go back and look in your chart, Marcia, it's going to be happening in the solar chart for all Capricorns in the first house. So I'll be talking a lot about all the signs next year and writing about it. In the first house, it means that we are going to have to become impeccable. If people have it happening in their second house, it's going to be a little different, third house, etc. So with your chart, we've already seen, let's stop this chart. Why can't I get this? All right, one more time, and there it goes. With your chart, not only is it happening at 23 degrees of Capricorn, but it's squaring all this Mars-Neptune of yours, okay? So what this means for you is we can't just look at it what it means in your second house and squaring the Mars-Neptune, and we know Mars is the ruler of your chart. As your child starts to grow on into her college years and you are retired, you're going to have to become super dedicated to your spiritual direction. Period. Super dedicated. If you think you're going to just go fishing somewhere and relax in a hammock, it's not going to happen. Not you. Not with the powerful Saturn Pluto in the first house. So it's going to really affect the Mars Neptune. It's going to be in your second house. And there's every reason to think that you can do it. Now, when you look at the USA's chart with Cancer here, July the 4th, and Saturn and Pluto will be in the 7th house. So I will be writing articles about what this Saturn Pluto is going to mean to all 12 signs. The USA's chart is going to be in the 7th house, which is your role in the world. The role you play as policeman of the world has got to change. That's a great big mouthful.
Mm-hmm.
And with Saturn and Pluto in the 7th house, we're going to start getting comeuppance from how we've been toying around with England and France and Greece and Turkey and Iran and all these different countries. The current thought for many is that they've been screwing us. We need to put America first. That's false thinking. We've been putting America first all along. We need to start to balance it out. And what Pluto and Saturn will do is the more we insist on being unfair, the crueler it's going to be to us. The more we insist upon renewing friendly efforts with other countries, the friendlier the Saturn and Pluto will be with us. It's going to have to do with nuclear powers because of Pluto. It's going to have to do with this whole thing from China wanting to be number one in the world. And they're going to be nuclear threats. I can't say they'll be used, but I can't think of anything worse for the climate than Saturn and Pluto like this. So we're going to have to really get serious, just like you're hearing on all fronts. So Marcia, you've seen, as we end things here, you've seen a lot of spinning around of your chart. Your chart's really pretty well balanced. That was a really good thing you did when you adopted, not just because you adopted, but because you followed and you were in touch with an internal urging from spirit. You did it.
I was.
Not a lot of people are aware of it, or they think they're nuts. What do you mean you're going to China? Why can't you go down the block? We went to China, right? And you did it. Mm-hmm. And the reason you did China was because you were born with the sun opposite Uranus. Mm. When the sun Uranus, you're not going to Paris, you're not going to London, you're not going to New York, you're not going to San Francisco, you're going to somewhere in Shanghai. And you pull it off with the impish little smile.
And I'll tell you, the first moment we saw each other,
yeah,
she looked at me with her eyes, and Anita saw it too. And she said with her eyes, "Where have you been, Mom?"
How old was she?
7 months.
She was 7 months old. Isn't that remarkable?
It was incredible.
That's just remarkable. As an astrologer, the remarkable thing is when you're in touch with the planets, that means you're in touch with yourself. Hmm. You know, and we're all, not all of us, but most of us are very hesitant to give up the ego. This ego is going to drive everything. Jesus is in the back seat. And, you know, you're surely a statement that at least you're listening to Marcia and listening to God at the same time. And we see with your Mars Neptune and mine also being hit by Pluto Saturn in the next several years, we're going to have to be very firm about what we're going to do. Don't be surprised if you come up with a whole new avenue for yourself. A whole new avenue. I don't know what that means, but Pluto Saturn is about rebuilding structures. Now, I don't think astrologically it looks like you might dive back into theater and redesign how theater is being done, but I don't think that's going to be the case.
Oh, I don't think so either.
No, I think you're done, finished. Yes, Elke?
What house is what planet and house rules theater?
The fifth house.
The fifth house?
Yeah, I would think so. The fifth.
Yeah, fun,
entertainment,
mm-hmm. And planet.
Well, it's a very Jovian. The theater is very Jovian, is it not? Lunar and Jupiter. Spreading out the word, you know.
It
Anyhow,
wouldn't be Mercury?
well, Mercury's not powerful enough. Mercury would be part of it, certainly, but it's not powerful enough to rule something on a grandiose scale. Mercury would be local community theater.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so very good. We're at the end, and thank you so much for being my guinea pig tonight. Reminding people, thanking you so much for joining us on YouTube. If you want to join us live any Thursday night, it's 8 o'clock Thursdays. It's free. And just go to, that's 8 o'clock Eastern. Just go to Google and put in Astrology Unplugged, and we'll see you then. Now, hopefully we get an hour recording, and you'll see it online tonight or tomorrow. Good night, everybody, and thank you. Good night, Marcia, bud.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye. See you, Ray.